The heavy iron door creaked ominously as Detective Sarah Collins pushed it open, her flashlight piercing the darkness of the basement. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something more sinister, that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Officer Mike Sanchez followed closely behind, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered weapon. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the building's outdated heating system. The basement was expansive, with shadows playing tricks on their eyes as they moved cautiously through the maze of old furniture and discarded machinery. It was Mike who saw him first. "Over here," he called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Sarah's heart raced as she hurried to his side, her flashlight beam illuminating a sight that would haunt her for years to come. An 11-year-old boy was handcuffed to a massive oil tank, his face pale and gaunt under the harsh light. His clothes were dirty and torn, and his eyes, a piercing blue, were wide with fear, yet oddly resigned. "We're here to help," Sarah said gently, crouching down to his level. Her voice was calm but firm, a tone she had perfected over years on the force. "Can you tell us your name?" The boy hesitated, his gaze flickering towards the shadows as if expecting someone else to emerge from them. "Alex," he finally whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Alex, we're going to get you out of here," she promised. But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of unanswered questions bearing down on her. Who would do this to a child? And why? Officer Sanchez was already on his radio, calling for backup and medical assistance. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable as he relayed their location and situation. "We've got a kid down here, handcuffed. We need EMTs now." As they waited for help to arrive, Sarah's mind raced over the details of their unexpected discovery. There had been no reports of missing children in this area, at least none that matched Alex's description. This revelation only deepened the mystery. A subtle noise, a soft scraping sound, broke through her thoughts. Her flashlight beam swung back towards Alex, but it wasn't him making the noise. Her eyes narrowed as she swept the light across the room once more. In the far corner of the basement, just beyond where their flashlights had first reached, something glinted in the dark, a metal grate slightly ajar. Sarah motioned for Mike to cover her as she approached the grate cautiously. Her heart pounded in her chest as she knelt down and peered inside. Within lay a small notebook, its pages yellowed and edges curled with age. Carefully retrieving it with gloved hands, Sarah opened it to reveal cramped handwriting. Names, dates, cryptic notes that hinted at something far larger than a simple abduction. She felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that this basement held more secrets than just Alex. And perhaps those secrets were watching them, even now. As sirens wailed in the distance, drawing nearer by the second, Sarah knew this was only the beginning of a case that would test every limit of her resolve. The wail of sirens grew louder as Detective Sarah Collins set the old notebook aside, its cryptic contents gnawing at her mind. Officer Mike Sanchez remained vigilant, the tension palpable, as they waited for backup to arrive. Alex, still handcuffed, watched them with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Just as the first responders burst through the basement door, another figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her late 30s, her face lined with worry and fatigue. Her sudden appearance startled everyone, causing Mike to draw his weapon instinctively. "Please, no," she cried out, raising her hands in surrender. "I'm Clarissa Cardone," she said breathlessly. "I'm Alex's mother." Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Mike before holstering her flashlight. "Mrs. Cardone," she began cautiously, "we need to understand what's happened here. Why was your son restrained like this?" Clarissa hesitated, glancing at Alex with eyes full of unresolved conflict. "I did it," she confessed, her voice shaking with emotion. "But you must understand, it's not what you think." The room grew silent, the distant echo of sirens now fading into the background. "Explain," Sarah urged gently but firmly. Taking a deep breath, Clarissa began her story, her words heavy with a disturbing rationale that sent a chill through the room. She spoke of a past filled with fear, of threats from unseen enemies, and a belief that by restraining Alex, she was protecting him from an imminent danger. They watch us, Clarissa murmured, casting nervous glances toward the basement's darkened corners as if expecting those unseen eyes to reappear. I had to keep him safe from them, from their influence. Sarah listened intently, her skepticism growing alongside a dawning horror at what these delusions had driven Clarissa to do. The notebook lay between them, like a bitter testament to her fractured reality. But Mrs. Cardone, Sarah interjected carefully, keeping him chained like this, it's not protection, it's imprisonment. Her words were firm but compassionate. Clarissa nodded slowly, tears welling up as she faced the truth of her actions. I know, she whispered brokenly. But I didn't know how else to keep him safe when no one believed me about them, about their plans. As EMTs moved in to attend to Alex, gently releasing him from his shackles and checking for injuries, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, a conspiracy, or perhaps just the tragic unraveling of a mind under pressure. Clarissa, Sarah said softly but urgently, the names in that notebook, who are they? Are they connected to whatever you believe is threatening your family? Clarissa hesitated again, but then nodded slowly. They're part of it, she confessed cryptically. But I can't say more, not yet. Her gaze flickered once more toward the darker recesses of the basement. With Clarissa in custody for questioning and Alex safely in the hands of medical personnel, Sarah knew this case was far from over. There were still layers of deception and madness to unravel, a web. Detective Sarah Collins stood outside the interrogation room, peering through the one-way glass at Clarissa Cardone. The woman sat hunched, her hands clasped tightly on her lap, eyes darting nervously to every corner of the brightly lit room. The notebook with its ominous list of names and dates lay on the table before her, a silent testament to the mystery they were unraveling. She's scared, Officer Mike Sanchez remarked, joining Sarah. But there's something she's not telling us. Sarah nodded, replaying Clarissa's panicked words in her mind. It's only just beginning, she had said, and that warning still lingered like a shadow over the investigation. We need to understand what those names mean, Sarah replied, her voice determined. They entered the room together, their presence causing Clarissa to flinch slightly. Sarah sat down across from her, adopting a gentler tone than she felt. Mrs. Cardone, we need your help. Those names in the notebook? Are there more children involved? Clarissa hesitated, her eyes welling up with fresh tears. I don't know, she admitted shakily. But they all came to me, parents like me, frightened for their children. They believed we were being watched by something sinister, something that preys on our fears. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Mike. The notion of parents confining their children out of sheer paranoia was both unsettling and tragic. What made you think Alex was in danger? Mike asked gently. Strange occurrences, Clarissa replied haltingly. Objects moving on their own, voices in the night. At first, I thought I was losing my mind, but then other parents started sharing their stories too. Her voice rose slightly in pitch, as if defending her sanity against the invisible accusations. Sarah leaned forward, pressing gently but firmly for more details. Can you give us any information about these other parents? Anything that might help us find them or their children? Clarissa swallowed hard, glancing at the notebook as if it held answers she couldn't articulate. They're all listed there, she whispered finally. But some are just initials. I don't have all their full names. We were too scared to share too much. As Sarah flipped through the pages again, her eyes caught on a particular entry, MR, 12th State, meet at 3 a.m. It was handwritten in different ink and bore an urgency that made her pulse quicken. We need to find out who MR is, Sarah concluded aloud, and why they needed to meet at such an odd hour. Her mind raced with possibilities. Another child in danger, another parent trapped in an endless cycle of fear. Before Clarissa could respond further, a knock echoed from the door, a uniformed officer handing Sarah a slip of paper. It was a report. Another child had been reported missing earlier that day, fitting the vague descriptions from the notebook. The room seemed to constrict around them as realization dawned. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger orchestrated pattern. We have to move fast, Sarah said urgently to Mike as they left the room, leaving Clarissa with a promise of finding the truth behind her fears. Outside, the night had settled heavily over the city, a city now marked by an undercurrent of fear and mystery that Sarah was determined to unravel. Detective Sarah Collins felt the weight of the case more than ever as she walked briskly through the corridors of the precinct. Her mind raced with thoughts of Clarissa Cardone's cryptic warnings and the newly missing child. The connections between these incidents seemed to grow more sinister by the hour. In the sterile confines of the interrogation room, Clarissa sat alone, her face a mask of anxiety and regret. Across town, Alex was safe under medical care, but the questions surrounding his captivity were far from resolved. The notebook with its list of names and dates was now central to their investigation, a puzzle demanding to be solved. Sarah, Officer Mike Sanchez called out, catching up with her just outside the briefing room. The report just came in. MR is a local teacher, Melissa Rivera. She's been leading a parent group about these unexplained incidents. Sarah felt a chill at this revelation. And has anyone spoken to her? She asked urgently. We have officers on their way, Mike replied, his expression grim. But we need to think about Clarissa's charges. Child endangerment, false imprisonment. She could face serious time if convicted. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. But what if there's more to this? If Melissa and those other parents have been acting out of genuine fear, convinced that something real threatens their children, we need to tread carefully. Her voice was firm, but laced with concern for all involved. Inside the briefing room, they gathered with other detectives and officers to discuss their next steps. The air was thick with tension as Sarah laid out the potential implications. A network of terrified parents, driven by fear into confining their own children, a scenario both tragic and deeply disturbing. We have to consider every angle, Sarah stated, addressing her colleagues. If there's even a shred of truth in what they believe, we need to uncover it before more kids are hurt or go missing. Her words resonated through the room like an unspoken oath. As discussions continued, new leads emerged. A series of strange disturbances reported at schools and homes linked to those named in the notebook. Each incident added another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. By late afternoon, Sarah found herself back at her desk, reviewing notes and trying to piece together a coherent narrative from disparate clues. She knew their window was closing fast. Every minute mattered when lives were potentially at stake. A sudden ring from her phone pulled her focus back sharply, a call from one of the officers dispatched to Melissa Rivera's residence. Detective Collins, came the voice on the line, tense with urgency. We found something. It looks like Melissa was preparing for some kind of meeting tonight, midnight at an abandoned warehouse on 12th Street. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she scribbled down details. We need surveillance set up immediately, she instructed quickly, and I want eyes on all entrances and exits. Her mind spun with possibilities. Was this meeting a chance for answers or another step deeper into danger? As she hung up, Sarah felt a mix of anticipation and dread settling over her like a heavy fog. The pieces The moon hung high over the city as Detective Sarah Collins and Officer Mike Sanchez arrived at the abandoned warehouse on 12th Street. Their breath visible in the crisp night air, they moved with cautious urgency, knowing that tonight could bring either closure or more questions. The warehouse loomed dark and imposing, its windows shattered like eyes forever open to secrets. Around them, officers moved silently into position, their radios crackling with hushed confirmations of readiness. Sarah felt a familiar tension in her gut, a mix of anticipation and dread. We've got eyes on all exits, Mike whispered, his eyes scanning their surroundings. If Melissa Rivera shows up, we'll know. Sarah nodded, her mind racing over the events that had led them here. Clarissa Cardone's fear-driven actions, the notebook with its cryptic entries, and the missing child's report all pointed to this moment. As midnight approached, shadows shifted inside the warehouse. Sarah's heart quickened as she spotted movement, a figure slipping through a side entrance. She signaled Mike, and they advanced quietly, their footsteps muffled against the cold concrete. Inside, the air was thick with dust and anticipation. Sarah squinted through the dim light, spotting a small group gathered near the center, parents huddled together in whispered conversation. Among them was Melissa Rivera, her face lit by a single flickering lantern. Sarah stepped forward cautiously, revealing herself to the group. Melissa Rivera, she called out softly but firmly. The group started, turning towards her with expressions ranging from fear to relief. Melissa stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a worn notebook to her chest. Detective Collins, she acknowledged quietly. We know about the meetings, Sarah began gently. We understand you're scared. Clarissa told us as much, but we need you to help us understand what's really happening here. Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she nodded slowly. We just want to protect our children, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Strange things have been happening, things we can't explain. Her gaze flickered toward the others, who nodded in solemn agreement. Sarah pressed gently for more details. Can you tell us about these things? Anything that might help us piece this puzzle together? Melissa swallowed hard, taking a shaky breath before speaking. Voices, whispers at night, things moving when no one is there, she described haltingly. At first we thought it was just stress or imagination, but then it kept happening. Her voice rose slightly in pitch as if defending their collective sanity. Mike stepped forward, his tone measured and calming. And why meet here? What was supposed to happen tonight? Melissa hesitated, glancing at her companions before answering. We were hoping to confront it, to find some proof or understanding of what's haunting us, she confessed. Sarah exchanged a glance with Mike as realization dawned. The parents had not been acting out of malice, but sheer desperation and fear. We can help, Sarah assured them firmly, but we need you to trust us, to work with us, rather than hiding away in fear. Her words resonated through the warehouse like a promise of hope amidst uncertainty. The parents nodded slowly, some wiping away tears, while others shared looks of determination mixed with relief. As they began gathering evidence and testimonies from those present, Sarah felt a sense of closure, not because all questions were answered, but because they had taken a step toward rebuilding trust within this fractured community. Outside, dawn was breaking, casting light over a city still shrouded in mystery, yet now hopeful for resolution.